And welcome back to the Second Screening Podcast. My name is Nick Lane, and with me, as always, is my very good friend Matthew.
Hello, Internet.
Alright, this week we are reviewing the movie Gravity.
Yes, and a little bit about Gravity. So it's, I think everybody has seen it, but in case not, it was 2015, I believe, and directed by Alfonso... And who I always knew him from Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Oh, I didn't realize that was a movie.
I mean, I know he's been around for a while, and I believe he did Birdman and maybe also Children of Men, but we're going to look that up later, and I'll probably be wrong.
Man, that would be amazing that if he did Children of Men, because I really like Children of Men, and spoiler alert, I did not like Gravity.
Yeah, I know, and I actually am very curious to see how today's discussion goes for that reason.
Yeah, so the tone of this episode is going to be a little bit different from last time's, where last time we really very much enjoyed The Fountain. This time, I don't think that that's the case with this movie.
Well, so that's what I think is going to be so interesting about this, because, you know, as you know, I actually followed the rules this time, and I watched it once with you, and then once about 4 hours ago.
Yeah.
When I was completely tired and hungover.
Yeah, spoiler alert, we had a party last night.
Yeah, yes we did, and we're partying right now as we tend to do. But I actually turned around on it this morning. I actually enjoy the movie now, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah,
we'll talk about it.
Yeah, let's get that into in our second screening section. So a little bit about the movie. Obviously, it stars Sandra Bullock and George Clooney, and then a smattering of other people, but who really cares?
Well, there's the Russian guy, and then it's Ed Harris's beautiful, beautiful voice. And honestly, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, exactly. And Ed Harris, he did have a really great voice in this movie.
Yeah, Alfonso.
Cuarón.
There's no way I've ever.
Cuarón.
Yeah, he did do Children of Men.
So the movie starts with Sandra Bullock, or Dr. Stone. Her name's Dr. Stone.
Yes.
She's Sandra Bullock. And George Clooney, and then the Russian guy named Sharif.
I'm going to call him Chekhov.
Yeah, Chekhov.
Because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. They're on a mission attached to the Hubble Space Telescope. They're installing a new system.
Yeah, a system that Sandra Bullock, Dr. Stone, designed. Because I remember, she's like, I'm used to working on this in the basement of a hospital.
Yeah, that was one of the parts that I thought was quite weird, is the fact that she was a medical doctor, but she was working on the Hubble Space Telescope. That was kind of strange. So she's working on the system while George Clooney is just fucking around in space.
Yeah, well, I guess in theory, and obviously later on it's like, man, I wish he probably wishes he wouldn't have done that. But I suppose the theory is he's testing the manned mobility unit, the MMU, right? So it's like, yeah, he's this new boot goofing around, but I guess that, in terms of the actual mission, he's testing its maneuverability and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it still looks funny to watch.
Yeah, it was quite jarring in my opinion. Like, both the times I watched, I was just like, what is this asshole doing?
I think it's interesting because to me there was such a contrast, and maybe this was by design or who knows, but it's like she is like intensely focused and he's just kind of messing around. Yeah, I do agree that was a bit jarring.
Yeah, so Sharif at that point, the other member of their
Chekhov,
yeah, the other member of their unit got done with his section. So he was done and he starts dancing around, and so they're focusing on getting Sandra Bullock's part, Dr. Stone, whatever.
Yeah.
Part attached to the Hubble Space Telescope.
Yes.
When a Russian satellite is destroyed by the Russians, so that, they needed to dispose of their satellite. However, something goes wrong.
Well, I don't think anything went wrong. I think it was pretty analogous to the 2007 Chinese ASAT test, which was the anti-satellite test. I don't know why they didn't just say China did it. It was funny to me, but my actual guess on this, and I don't have anything to back this up, it's like China is kind of a huge movie industry now, and it's one of those things where they could have just made it China because that actually happened in real life, but they were like, oh, but then our foreign box office numbers wouldn't be as high.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Russians basically blow up their own satellite, and it starts a debris cloud, which it's Kessler syndrome, right? It's basically a cascading, compounding. This debris creates more debris, which is kind of what's happening right now.
Right, and so that's where I was saying that it kind of went wrong, because I don't think they anticipated it to have the Kessler effect. They just anticipated it to like blow up, and then what shouldn't have affected anybody else, but it turned out that it kind of went awry, and I don't think that the Russians would have wanted to, destroy the Hubble Space Telescope or the ISS or anything like that.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
So, which, spoiler alert, all those things happen. So, yeah, the debris cloud is going around, and it tears up their mission. They have to scramble to detach from the Hubble telescope. Doesn't happen. Their shuttle shuttle that they're on, I want to say Voyager, but it's not the Voyager. It's something else.
Yeah, I can't remember. Was it Discovery?
Yeah,
it was basically the shuttle.
Yeah, so the shuttle that they're on gets destroyed, and with it, basically everybody else. Sandra Bullock is flung into space. She, is spinning around, and this is like one of the parts where I hated her the most, because all you could hear is her just like her pleading sound, like this mewling sound that she was making while she was spinning around. And I understand, like that's a very human thing to do, but just the way that it was played, I just could not stand it. So she's spinning around. She's separated from Lieutenant Kowalski, aka George Clooney.
Yeah.
And she finally is able to like get oriented a little bit, and finally the radio comes back, and it's Lieutenant Kowalski on the radio asking where she is, and she can't figure it out. She was finally able to get her sight on the ISS and was able to, give him the, like, not the coordinates, but the ISS is at 7 o'clock and North is at 12 o'clock.
Yes.
So from that, he was able to figure out basically where she was, and then he instructed her to start flashing her
flashlight,
her torch, as they describe it in the film. And that, I think, is one of the smartest things in this movie, is the use of a flashlight as a beacon.
Yes.
Because that's the best thing you could do in space, is have a constant visual signal. Like, if nothing else is working, the flashing light, I think, is the best way to figure out where something is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you see that, pretty much anywhere survivable, you see that at sea, and I mean, it's just a good idea. And, unlike other things, pretty much the only thing that she had on her was, whatever she was working with. So, yes.
Yeah, so they become reunited, and they tether themselves to each other, and they start making their way back to the shuttle.
Lieutenant Kowalski is towing her.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's running out of oxygen.
Yes, that's a good point, is the fact that she has, I think at that point, like 20% of oxygen left.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so a very minuscule amount. At some point, he instructs her to sip, not gulp, which she immediately ignores.
Yeah, well, and that's, one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting about this movie is, the astronauts are basically the cream of the crop in terms of human performance, right? And it's like, these people are highly trained, highly disciplined, because you can't really mess around up there. And it's, one of those things where it's like she had 6 months of astronaut training, and then,
she immediately ignores all of it as soon as, like, the shit hits the fan.
Yeah, well, and when she's installing her module, to me, like, what I felt they were saying was, like, she's the only person ever. It's like, okay, maybe she made it, and she's, like, the only person that knows how it works, or, like, how to design it. But, like, I'm pretty sure somebody else could install it. But to me, it kind of implied that, like, nobody else could install it, and that's why they had to send her. But yeah, she doesn't sip because it takes a lot of discipline and training.
Right, and that's the other thing that we'll get into this in more of a review. But if you are the only person who can install something, then that thing is not useful.
Yeah, fair enough.
So they're making their way back to the shuttle, and during this entire time, Kowalski is trying to radio to Houston. He's trying to radio to Earth, and Sandra Bullock, Dr. Stone, is asking him about it the entire time, and he explains to her that in case the radio does come on, there needs to be some chatter. There shouldn't be any silence at that point. And so she clearly doesn't understand that, because apparently she's not an astronaut.
Right.
So they make their way back to the shuttle, and they find Sharif. No one's in the military, apparently, except for Kowalski, who's a lieutenant in space.
No lieutenant would ever be a commander of anything.
That was also interesting. So, Specialist Sharif, they find him, and he has got a hole in his head. Like, there is nothing left of his brain, essentially.
In the face.
Yeah. And that's actually how that would work in space. If there was debris flying around that fast. I believe they said that the debris was flying at 50,000 miles an hour, which seems accurate.
I thought it was like 17,000, but I can't remember.
I wrote 50,000 down, but I can't.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, I mean that's something where we can always look that up later. But yeah, if you got hit by a piece of debris, you're done.
Yeah, exactly. And they make their way into the shuttle, and everyone in the shuttle is dead. There was the pilots were in there.
Was it the shuttle or the ISS?
The shuttle. They haven't gone to the ISS yet.
Okay.
So they were at the shuttle, and the hull had been blown open, and the people inside who were not on the spacewalk, were freeze dried.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So they were dead. Then Kowalski comes up with a plan to try and get to the ISS because there should be escape pods on the ISS. The Soyuz escape pods.
Right.
And they start making their way there. And, it cuts away. Like, there's a jump cut, and time has passed, and they're just kind of, like, slowly drifting towards the ISS. And he's just basically talking the entire time. As he does. Kowalski is the kind of guy who tells stories and chats a lot. He's a chatterbox.
He's a braggart.
Yeah, he's a braggart.
Yeah. All of his stories are his party stories and his kind of...
How cool he was.
Fighter pilot kind of antics and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So he's talking the entire time. They're kind of making their way. And nothing of real note happens there. You kind of learn a little bit of...
Well, I think something really important happens there. Now, whether it should be or not, but that's when she talks about her daughter, right? And how she had a daughter, and her daughter, was playing tag and just died. I guess later, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say this right now, but, the the movie to me was kind of analogous to that story,
Right.
which is like her letting go and or finding hope, and we'll get to that later.
Yeah,
but that's the big part about that.
Okay, and you're right. I was like, nothing of note happened. That's how little I regard her character, is that when she establishes her backstory, I'm just like, nothing of note happened.
Yeah, it's kind of I think it's kind of a weak character, but maybe that's supposed to be the point at this stage in the movie is, we watch her grow. But yeah, at that point,
right.
she more annoys me than anything else.
Yeah, so she establishes that, like you said, her daughter died, and then at that point, all she ever does is she goes to work
and she
then
drives
because she got the call that her daughter died while she was driving.
Yeah,
she's stuck in a moment. She's stuck in time, essentially.
Yeah, and then George Clooney, he says, "What do you do?" And she says, "I drive." And then she gets in her Mustang and goes and robs a bank. And then Ryan Gosling appears because we're now watching Drive.
I wish.
Yeah.
So she establishes her backstory, and they make the ISS. When they get to the ISS, they have to accelerate hard to kind of angle themselves to get there.
Right.
They were kind of like basically shooting towards it the entire time, but because George Clooney was new boot goofing around in space, they don't have much of a charge left on the jetpack that he has.
Yeah,
whatever
it's probably compressed air.
Yeah. The maneuverable unit that he has on.
Yeah, the MMU.
So he doesn't have anything left. He has like one or two good pushes. So they have to hit the ISS hard at that point. They get there, they get to the ISS, and then neither of them can make a deposit on anything to hold on to. And so they're basically like floating, like bumping into everything. Like they're pinballing around the ISS.
Yeah.
Until finally, and then also, didn't the debris come again? No. The tether had gotten wrapped around one of the solar panels and it broke.
Well, yeah, and she had crashed into it trying to grab onto stuff too.
Right,
So yeah, I mean, basically they were at that
separated
point they were kind of debris.
Yeah,
exactly. They basically crashed into it trying to grab onto something. Yes,
right. They were essentially debris. Yeah, you're right. And so the tether broke really easily. That was kind of surprising. The tether broke, and so Kowalski had grabbed onto something at this point, but she wasn't, and she was about to like float away into space when I can't remember exactly how it happened, but she got a rope.
Her foot got caught in like some, I think it might have been the parachute cords, because George Clooney had said that the one Soyuz was gone, so they had ejected, and the other one, he said it was damaged and the parachute was deployed, so it was useless. So it might have been the parachute.
It was
the risers.
Yeah. And so Kowalski jumps to catch her, I think, or
however it happens.
Yeah,
basically, she's wrapped up. Her foot's in the rigging, and then basically she grabs on to the tether. I think the broken one.
Yeah.
And so she's holding on to him.
Yeah, and I actually want to go back. I don't think that George Clooney's character actually did grab onto anything.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, I think I screwed up there in my memory. So yeah, she gets wrapped up in the parachute cord and he's floating around, and they're trying to like catch each other, and so she finally like grabs him by the tether.
Yeah, she grabs the tether.
Yeah, she grabs the tether, and he's like being pulled away from her.
Yeah, that was that was the thing that like when I watched it this morning, when I saw that, I was kind of like, argh.
Yeah, that sucks.
And it's only because I'm sure that this movie got a lot technically right, and I know it got some things technically wrong. We'll talk about it later in the second screening, but that one annoyed me because I don't think that's right, because there was no more acceleration once he gets stopped. And the reason why it bugged me so much is because that was a huge plot point. Like if it would have been just something else.
So she catches him.
Yes.
And he had at that point stopped all momentum.
Yes.
But for some reason, they were still like being pulled away from the ISS.
Yes.
Which shouldn't have happened. He then makes a heroic decision to let himself be killed because he's being pulled away from her.
Right.
Like in the plot of the film, he's being pulled away from her, even though in reality that isn't actually what would have happened.
Yeah, it's a cliffhanger thing where he lets go because, if he doesn't, she's going to be pulled off, and then they're both going to die.
Right. And so he, lets himself float away. And during that time, he's still talking.
Yeah, he's still talking.
She somehow manages to find her way back into the ISS at that point. Or not back into, but into the ISS. She struggles her way into the ISS and then, basically mourns the passing of Kowalski as his radio chatter.
Yeah, as the signal strength goes down, and then she does kind of the same thing. So I guess she was paying attention earlier, because she says, Houston blind, and then she says, I'm the only survivor, and so she's kind of in there, and then a fire breaks out.
Yeah, eventually. But here's the one part I want to go back to, is that when she first gets into the ISS after Kowalski's chatter dies away, essentially the death character, she goes into the fetal position.
Oh, that's right.
And I want to make a note of this because she looked exactly like a fetus does. And not just like a fetal position, even one of the oxygen cords in the airlock happened to align right where her umbilical cord would be.
Oh man, I missed that.
Yeah,
Good catch.
Yeah,
okay.
so she looks like a fetus in a womb.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they did that on purpose.
Yeah, I guess that would be the rebirth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Wow, cool.
So that was actually that was a good part.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she's trying to find her way into the escape pod, the Soyuz one, the one that's broken. Now, the reason why she's doing that is that they realize that there's no escape for them on the ISS.
Right.
So before he had died, Lieutenant Kowalski was saying that they could get into the Soyuz escape pod and then drive that over to the Chinese station.
Right.
And the Chinese station has an escape pod.
Yes.
So she's trying to make her way into that Soyuz one that's broken.
Right.
And while on her way to the escape pod, a fire breaks out, or had already been broken out, I guess.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact details,
right,
but yeah, it forces her hand.
Yeah. So she makes her way to the escape pod under great duress and closes the door right when the fire was going to like overtake her.
Right.
And I was watching that even the second time. I was just kind of like, I feel like she should have like died at that point. Like that fire should have killed her, I think, because it was like on her hair, and I don't know, in an oxygen-rich environment like the ISS is, because it's pressurized cabin.
Well, wait, you're right. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like she would have just been engulfed in flames immediately.
Yeah, probably.
Oh well.
Yeah.
So she makes a harrowing escape into the Soyuz escape pod, and then in her 6 months of astronaut training, she remembers, how to turn it on.
Well, she did the simulator, and they talk about that, and he says, you flew the simulator, and she's like, I crashed it every time, and so she, she's going through the pre-flight, but she, they at least established that she, in theory, is trained on it, which I don't know if that would actually happen.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. So anyway, she's somewhat trained on it. She's got the books with her, and she knows which one to use. Like, if I want to unlock from the ISS, it's the red book. So she's like, red book.
Yeah, and that's how aviation in space is for that reason.
Yeah, exactly. And so she decouples from the space station, but the parachute is still wrapped around the ISS.
Right.
This is one of the catching parts for me. The reason why Kowalski decided to, untether himself from Sandra Bullock was that the ropes they're going to break.
Right.
However, when she takes off from the ISS, the same ropes that she was attached to are still wrapped around the ISS, and they slingshot a rocket around. The escape pod is essentially a rocket at this point, and she's trying to get to the Chinese station like we established, but she can't pull away from the ISS because the ropes have bound her to it, and she keeps being slingshot through space,
right,
wrapping around the ISS with the same ropes that would have broken under the strength of Kowalski's giant penis, I guess.
No, I mean, what it could have been was her foot's going to come out of the ropes, right?
Yeah, no, I know. But so she's struggling to become decoupled from the ISS, that's basically the plot of this movie is Sandra Bullock struggles in space.
Yeah, basically. Well, there's basically 3 points,
yeah,
and each point is just, so I guess it's kind of Greek, right? It's like each point is just getting to the next point until you finish.
Right. But the thing that I kept noticing is that she could not do anything right the first time. Her character, every time she went to go grab something, she kept fumbling. She could never make a deposit on, even Kowalski,
right,
even the tether. She had to scramble for the tether. When she was, launched out into space, she was scrambling around. It's Sandra Bullock struggles in space, the movie.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. That's basically what it is.
Yeah. So she is being slingshotted around the ISS by these ropes, but she notices that she had gotten into the right position that she could pull away. And so with one last great push, she is able to detach from the ISS and take the parachute with her. So she's on her way to the Chinese station.
Right.
While en route to the Chinese station, she's like, I've got all this fuel, right? But the afterburner isn't working. Turns out the fuel gauge of the Soyuz rocket was stuck at the middle point, and she taps it, and then it suddenly drops down to 0.
Yeah.
Which I was just like, oh, great, this really advanced technology that goes into space, tap it, and then, oh, whoops, it was stuck.
I actually think that's probably one of the most realistic things about this, because that if the Russians were making something, I mean, it's totally possible, and it's kind of a crack at Russia.
I guess.
And then this is my chance to plug one of the greatest lines in cinematic movie history, which is from Armageddon: American components, Russian components, all made in Taiwan.
We peaked there. Yeah, so I just noticed, I'm just like, I cannot believe that the suspenseful nature of this scene, or the suspense of this scene, was hinged on the fact that the fucking gauge doesn't work properly. I felt like that was the stupidest plot point.
See, but that's how real life works, though, and that's why it's so interesting, because that's probably one of the more reasonable things in this movie, is that would totally happen.
Yes. Okay, so she at least is en route to the Chinese station, but she has no fuel.
Yes, and so she can't get there fast enough, right?
Yeah.
Because and that's the problem. Because just like George Clooney, it's like if you're on a trajectory, then you're okay, but she can't get there fast enough.
Right, because the debris cloud is coming back around.
In 90 minutes.
It had been 90 minutes.
Well, the movie's 90 minutes long because I think after they get hit initially, George Clooney says we have 90 minutes till that debris cloud comes back around.
Right.
And so...
However, time has passed.
Yes, correct.
There was a series of jump cuts that kind of like established that time has passed. The debris cloud comes around twice.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it does come around twice.
Yeah, so at this point, while they were on the ISS, I believe, the debris cloud
hit
once. And that actually might have what started the fire.
Yeah, oh, that actually makes sense.
So yeah, she's not going to get to the Chinese station swiftly enough to get into one of the escape pods and then get back to Earth before the debris cloud comes around again.
Right.
So she's just kind of floating in space. And during this time, she's been doing proper radio discipline where she's been trying to message Houston or whoever can hear her. She actually picks up the same cadence and proper discipline that George Clooney's character was using, saying, again, the Houston
blind.
Yeah, Houston in the blind.
In the blind, yeah.
Dr. Stone in the blind, anyone, Mayday, Mayday. And while she's saying Mayday, she picks up a signal.
Yes.
From someone who is not an English speaker.
Right.
I don't know what nationality that person was, but he was a jovial man.
Yes. Yeah. And they were singing or something.
Well, he was just talking on. It seems like he was a amateur ham radio person because she picked him up on the AM frequency.
I out of all the things I remember, for some reason, she's like, I picked you up on the AM.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that he is a amateur ham radio guy who just was just chatting into the darkness of space essentially.
Well, and that makes sense because I know the ham guys do absolutely crazy stuff, bounce the ham radio signal off the moon and communicate to the other side. So I actually kind of like that because
that was one part that was actually very real to me. It's like that there could be just somebody talking into the void and just happened to be picked up in space.
Like they have a podcast.
Yeah, like they have a podcast. So he's chatting with her, and they established that his name is Agenlog or something. I forgot to write down what his name was. So, but she picks up his name, and he thinks her name is Mayday because she keeps saying Mayday.
Oh, okay. I did not pick up on that either.
I picked up on that. So he's just chatting with whoever, and he's got a baby, and that kind of hits Dr. Stone. Right way or the wrong way, but she's very sentimental. It starts getting misty-eyed at this person who she's talking to. So she thought originally that he was someone in space with her, but she is alone in space at this point. There's literally nobody else in space.
Yeah, because everybody else is either dead or basically evacuated. Yeah,
exactly. And so she at first was very hopeful. Turns out he's on Earth, and he's just some guy. And so she is listening to his life. He has a baby because the baby's crying. He has a dog because the dog starts barking.
Yeah, I remember that.
And this is one of the worst scenes that I can think of. I hated this scene.
Okay.
Because she was just chatting with someone who, I admit that I don't speak any language other than English.
Right.
But I can't understand this other person. And then Sandra Bullock is just mumbling to herself, essentially, because the other person is not responding to her. That guy is just talking, and she seems to think that he is responding to her, but that's not at all the case. He's just chatting away, and she is just mumbling in space, and that whole scene, I was just like, shut the fuck up. At one point, they start barking.
No, because she goes I want
to hear the dogs again. I want to hear the dogs again.
Well, so I didn't mind. So I didn't mind that as much because it's like if you're talking to somebody on a ham radio and you don't speak the same language, the guy's just hearing something, and then she goes woof woof, and then he goes woof woof. It's that is probably the only time they actually communicate.
Yeah, and I agree. I understand why they have that scene in there. I understand that that's how that would work. I just hated it.
Okay.
It was so awful.
You're allowed to not like stuff. Yeah, that's
exactly.
understandable.
Oh, Lord Almighty. I know it was supposed to be her, humanizing.
Yeah, and yeah.
Scene, but I couldn't stand it. I fucking hated every second of that.
No, yeah.
I think even in my notebook, which I have here, I wrote in all caps, not in cursive, God, shut the fuck up. I fucking hated that so much. Yes, what is up with this barking scene? God, shut the fuck up. That's what I wrote. So eventually that signal fades away, and she's trying to make her way again to the Chinese station, but she kind of loses hope at this point.
Yes.
And I think she decides to kill herself by
Yeah,
oxygen.
she turns down the oxygen.
Yeah, oxygen deprivation. So she turns down the oxygen, so she'll essentially just fall asleep and die.
Yeah.
At which point she hallucinates, because everyone does during oxygen deprivation. They will hallucinate. And she has a dream of Lieutenant Kowalski, George Clooney's character, as if he had returned. He's like, oh yeah, I had like a little bit extra juice in the canister.
Or it came around the second time, right? Because he's going around too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the part I was like, why didn't he? He's got 90 minutes, and he seemed to have a full tank of oxygen.
Right.
He could have survived 90 minutes.
Well, yeah, I mean, you imagine that, it's like, obviously we don't know the final resolution to his character, but it's like, you imagine that he didn't seem like the type of guy to give up.
Right.
So it's like, it could have been.
It could have, he could have made it. Also, I want to note that when Sandra Bullock got into the ISS, she took off her American spacesuit and then replaced it with a Russian spacesuit. Now, that's important here because Lieutenant Kowalski, when he comes back, is wearing an American spacesuit and is very white. And she's wearing a Russian one, which is just kind of like this weird, dingy color. It's like slightly yellow.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's supposed to be a knock against the Russians.
I think that might have been...
or is that accurate? I don't know.
I'm not sure either.
I don't know what a cosmonaut, their suit looks like. It might actually be very accurate.
You would imagine it would be... Well, I think anything in space long enough is going to be white, right? I mean, like the U.S. flag is now just a white flag on the moon, which is good. And
we give up.
Yeah, it's basically a preemptive surrender for when aliens come in. Will Smith has to save us. But you'd think they'd be orange, right? Because I think that, orange is... that human beings can see orange the most.
Yeah.
But yellow is a pretty prominent color too.
Right. But it's just like this dingy yellow. It looks like someone had washed the suit with like a yellow bed sheet and like the color had run into the suit. That's the kind of like, it doesn't look like they intentionally made it yellow. It looks like it was accidentally yellow.
Well, I think that's, it's like just like the Soviet stuff is like, it's all super old and like it's generally reliable, but it's like, the Soyuz capsule, it's like, I mean, it's probably the most reliable space vehicle we have, but the thing is like 50 years old.
Yeah, it's true.
And so, all the Russian stuff is always kind of bent and things like that. So that was probably somewhat realistic.
All right. So anyway, he's there now.
Yes.
And he reminds her that there is extra fuel in the landing engine.
Well, so the first thing he does is he finds the vodka in the squeeze bottle, which like is how I will be consuming my vodka from now until the end of time because that's just magical.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's like, did you find the vodka on the ISS? Well, luckily it's right here. And he just has like pull it out because he'd mentioned earlier
that he knew where they hid the vodka.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I actually like that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she says that she's out of fuel, and he says, "What about the retro rockets?"
Right.
And she's like, "Those are for landing." And then I remember he's like, "Landing and taking off are the same thing." And that's also one of those things where it's like, "Oh, I have to save this fuel for landing." It's like it's like Firefly, where it's like if you don't open that door, she could die, and Jane goes, "If I open that door, we all die." It's like, but I can't land. Landing's not going to matter if you don't even get there.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're not going to land in that Soyuz rocket anyway. The parachute's already been deployed.
Right.
So fuck it. Use that.
Yeah.
Use that engine. Yeah. So he reminds her of that, and he basically convinces her not to kill herself.
Yes.
And then it turns out it was all a dream.
Yeah.
And I had already established that she hallucinates him being there. So,
yes.
Whoops. Sorry, podcast listener.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
Yeah. So he is dead. Kowalski is definitely dead.
Yes.
And that was just a dream that she was having. But she's like, oh, landing is taking off. And so she, pulls out the green book. This one is for green is for landing. Red is for taking off. Green is for landing. She pulls out the green book and then finds the right. And she has to trick the computer to think that it's landing.
Sure.
To use that rocket.
And that's reasonable. Yeah.
I absolutely understand. Yep. The one thing was that all of the computer was in Cyrillic.
Yes.
Which was kind of weird to me. I thought that all space equipment was in English. I thought that was a universal language for space.
I don't know for sure, but I thought everything had to have English, but could also have its native language.
Yeah, and maybe she just didn't set it to English.
Yeah, but again, it's one of those things where it's like, who knows, right? It's like, in theory, if that Soyuz capsule, because if it was in the escape capsule, it's like, who knows, man?
Yeah. So she tricks a computer, starts using the landing rocket, and makes her way to the Chinese station.
Yes.
And we once again have another scene of Sandra Bullock struggling in space.
Yeah.
Where she has to get out, or she leaves the capsule, takes the fire extinguisher with her. And I thought that was kind of neat, because the fire extinguisher is essentially the same maneuvering unit that George Clooney had. It's the same technology. However, one of them is controlled by a human, and the other one is controlled by a computer.
Right.
One of those is effective, and that's not the human.
Yeah, fair enough.
So she basically makes her way 90% 90% of the way to the Chinese rocket, jumps out of the capsule, and then tries to use the fire extinguisher to get the rest of the way to the Chinese station.
Yes.
Now, she does get to the Chinese station with some, what I would describe as impossible measures of calculation on her part, where she was able to, like, blow the fire extinguisher in exactly the right way to, like, stop her momentum in one direction and go the other direction. It's like, I don't think that a human being is capable of that level of, like, calculation.
Yeah, she's like Anakin Skywalker. Like, she's the only human that can, like, fly a pod racer because her reflexes are so fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think you're right. Like, that's...
Yeah.
That,
I was like, I know it's a movie. It's movie stuff. That was just slightly unbelievable to me. It's one of those times that pulled me away from the movie.
Yeah, and that's, you know, especially it's like, you know, if you're watching the Avengers, you know, you know that none of this is real, and so kind of anything can happen. But if you do your best to make your movie believable, then when you do things like this, it takes you out.
Yeah. So she makes her way to the Chinese station after, like we said, those impossible, maneuverable.
Yeah, they're basically orbital dynamic calculations that she did in her mind, which, you know, it's like when you play pool, human beings are actually pretty good at that, but, you know, the precision needed and the timing, but movie.
Pool's a 2-dimensional game, not a 3-dimensional game.
Good point.
So she struggles in space again and makes her way into the Chinese station. I remember the first time we watched this that I noticed the ping pong paddle, and I thought there was a ping pong table in space. I realized later, I was like, oh no, they just probably have,
they could also hit it back and forth.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I realized. Yeah. I was kind of being an idiot the first time we watched it. So she's on the Chinese station, and the reason why she was going to go there is that they have their own escape pods, which are actually just repurposed Soyuz escape pods. The same one that she used to get to the Chinese station, she's now going to use to get back to Earth.
Right.
And she makes her way to the escape pod. I don't believe that anything, like, really dramatic happens at this point, other than the debris cloud comes around again, and so she's got to get off the station as fast as possible.
Yeah, I think so.
I didn't think there was anything else, though. There wasn't, like, there wasn't another fire or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't remember anything like that.
Yeah, so she takes off from the Chinese station, struggles with the controls because they're all in Mandarin. I believe it's Mandarin.
Probably Mandarin.
Yeah, because I believe that's the quote-unquote official language of
China.
Yeah,
probably. I'm not sure, but
right. I believe it's in Mandarin. So she's struggling with that, like as if she didn't have any problems with Cyrillic before. Now the pod is in fucking Mandarin. Great. Yeah. So she takes off and she's basically just like points the gun at Earth and is like, just shoot at Earth, go.
Yeah, it's kind of the best you can do, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but because it's a repurposed Soyuz pod, she knows enough of the controls to basically land. And while she is en route to Earth, she kind of has this, I'm either going to burn up or I'm going to
have a great story
have
to
a
tell.
Great story.
Yeah.
Either way, it's been a great ride or something.
Right.
And like this really like, oh, this is a turning point for her character. She went up to space and found herself and came back an actual human, whereas before she was not quite really a human because she was like, all she was stuck in that moment.
Well, there's like two rebirths, right?
Right.
You know, she has her character and there's the rebirth, as you pointed out, in, you know, the ISS, and then this would be the second rebirth, which is, you know, and it almost quite literally is a trial by fire.
Right. And her character originally was just like a robot, had the same routine, and I believe that she probably wanted to kill herself. That's the way it was kind of portrayed to me. Like, it wasn't that she wanted to kill herself, it's just that if she died, it wouldn't have been a great inconvenience to her.
Yeah, kind of indifferent or agnostic towards living.
Right. And so that's why this scene is supposed to be quite powerful. It's
right.
Like she wants to live. She actually very much wants to live at this point. So she is able to maneuver the pod. She, you know, it splits off into the three pieces like it's supposed to. I remember there was one part where she was saying that she needs to, like, I was like, I need to decouple from the space station now. Like, oh, how do I do it? And she's like really struggling with the controls. Luckily, the debris cloud came around and did it for her, and it destroyed the fuck out of the space station enough that it's like there's not a space station that she needs to decouple from anymore. But she acted like she was like, oh, thank God I was successfully able to decouple from the space station. The space station blew apart.
Yeah, but if she didn't do it, the pre-flight checklist would have been complete. She couldn't take off.
Yeah.
So you know, even if she's just decoupling like a bolt, she's still got to do it. You can't take off.
Yeah, exactly. So she manages everything and lands in the ocean.
Well, in ocean. On her way back, like there's something wrong with the heat shields, and that's where like I might burn up. And then she also hears Ed Harris, basically. And it was funny because like he's like, identify yourself. Yeah. It's like, I'm coming from space. Yeah. There's like not a whole lot of options. Right. And then he says we're sending a rescue team, and she lands in a lake, not an ocean. It's a lake.
Okay. I thought it was an ocean.
No, because there's reeds when she's coming out. Yeah, it's a lake.
All right.
Yeah.
So she lands in a body of water.
Yes.
Probably a lake.
Yeah, probably.
And probably somewhere around North America because Houston is the one who's radioing to her, which means that it's somewhere around North America because it wouldn't have been Ed Harris if they landed in like the Black Sea. So that was one of the things that I didn't like though, was when she got back to Earth, instead of responding to Houston on the radio, and that might have been the fact that it was like a Chinese pod and she didn't know the controls well enough to like activate the radio, she doesn't say anything.
Well, and another thing, it's like she's pretty focused at the task at hand. You know, you're just trying to survive,
right.
And you'll deal with everything else later.
Yeah, and I understand that it's supposed to be she wants to get out of the pod and get onto dry land.
Well, it catches fire and goes in the water and starts like, yeah, there's smoke in there, and she has to get out fast.
Oh, I don't think I remember that. I was just like, you're safe in that pod. Who cares?
Well, and you also, I think she probably wants to get out soon because that thing's sinking, and so it's like even if there wasn't like filling with smoke, because I think like the heat shields were damaged or whatever, and so maybe there's a little fire it's catching. She has to kind of get out pronto.
Yeah, but that was one of the things that I was confused by because I believe that the capsules are designed to float. That was weird that it was sinking to me. Well, but it could be that it was damaged.
Yeah, if it's damaged, then that makes sense. Yeah, because they're even the pictures of like the Apollo astronauts, it's like that sunk to the bottom of the sea, like you're done.
Yeah, those guys are dead anyway, so who cares? Yeah, I thought they were designed to float. It could have been that it was damaged. However, they didn't establish anything like that.
Right.
So that was kind of confusing me. Anyway, so she gets out of the capsule under great duress, and so the movie basically ends with Sandra Bullock struggling on Earth now.
Yes.
In space.
Yeah.
Even when she gets out of the capsule, gets to land, and she can't even stand up. Now, I understand why.
Right.
But it's basically Sandra Bullock struggles the movie.
Right.
She basically can't stand up. But it ends on this great scene, like it's beautifully rendered because this whole entire movie is CGI, and it just looks awesome.
Yeah, and that's she looks up, and I think it's the Chinese space station is burning up.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, and it looks like meteorite.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or I guess maybe shooting stars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are they the same thing?
Yeah! Those are the same thing. So, movie ends. Boom. That's it.
Yep. Roll credits.
And some song plays, and I don't even remember what it is. All right, so first impression. I'll go into my first impression.
Okay.
So we watched it together.
Yes.
And I think that kind of did a disservice to the movie. Because when we watched it together, we kind of distracted each other. And we were also with my roommates, JJ and Colin. And we were all like kind of drinking and just having fun. And like basically, we were MST3King the movie while we were watching it.
Right.
Yeah. Like I remember thinking like, I don't remember anything about this movie after the first time I watched it, other than like the major plot points. Like I know they went to the ISS and something happened, so I didn't like really remember anything. I remember being outraged by George Clooney's character's death. I thought that was complete bullshit.
Yeah, I did not like that, and I think that is fair to dislike.
Other than that, I don't really feel like my feelings changed much. From viewing to viewing. So we watched it once, and I remember just like really not liking the movie. And not remembering anything about it. What about you? What was your first impression?
So yeah, my first impressions, and you covered them a little bit. I really disliked it. They got a lot of stuff technically right, and I think they got some things technically wrong. From the storytelling aspect,
there really isn't a story. I feel
it's probably there is a story, but it's kind of the most basic story ever, right?
Yeah.
It's not very nuanced. And I remember watching it the first time. One of the things that annoyed me is that it's basically the same thing 3 times, right? Mm-hmm. And I guess you could say any story is really that. But in this case, it's like, 1 to 2 to 3, and each one is kind of the same. Yeah. And I didn't really like that. But so that's kind of ends my first impression. I do agree that the MST3King it probably didn't give it the first chance that we should have.
Right. And so we both then decided to watch it on our own without anyone else around so that we could kind of give it, the attention that it deserved. And I actually wrote a lot about the movie in my notebook the second time I watched it. So let's kind of get into our second screening.
Okay.
So
that's the name of the podcast.
That's the name of the podcast. That's kind of what the point is. But going into watching it a second time, I put it off so much. I hated this movie the first time I watched it. And I watched it again, and I just fucking hated it again.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I hate this movie. This movie is terrible. Now, there's things that I understand better about this movie. Like when we first watched it, going back, I didn't understand why Sandra Bullock's character was in space because she was a medical doctor. However, the second time I watched it, I was paying attention this time, and she is the person who designed this scanning technology, this ambiguous scanning technology that is supposed to be useful for the Hubble Space Program.
Well, it's like okay, let's say that she worked on ultrasound, and we use ultrasound for human beings, and let's say somebody figures out, hey, we can, like stars put out ultrasound.
Right.
I know they don't,
whatever.
But it's like, because I remember when she's installing it, she says it was like designed for hospitals,
right.
but
yes. It turns out it's also useful for space.
Right.
And I I understood that then. I was like, okay, that's how she went from being a medical doctor to being in space. However, not really. Because if she's the person who designed it, that doesn't mean that she's the person who installs it.
Right, absolutely.
I have worked on defense contracts before. I've been an engineer in my past life, and everything is documented. I worked on a lab that was supposed to do data analysis, but it was treated like it was an airplane. Every screw that went into every server was explicitly documented about where it's supposed to go.
Right.
But anyone should have been able to do that.
Well,
so anyone should have been able to install that system. They don't need Sandra Bullock to do it.
Yeah, and that's the thing where it's like, the military and NASA in space, they don't like single points of failures. And like, there's pretty much, nothing that like all you're doing is like plugging it in.
Yeah.
When they send the astronauts up to like, do repairs on the Hubble, it's not like, they have to send up the engineer who made the Hubble. They have to work with the engineer on the ground and then train the astronauts on the ground to do this specific task.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I do agree it was a bit of a push to, have to send her up.
Right. And I guess that's the idea, is that she's supposed to be, this lay person they sent up to space, and then, anyone, like, what would they do in space? That's basically what this movie's supposed to be. It's like, it's you in space. Like, how would you struggle to survive if you, weren't an actual trained astronaut like Lieutenant Kowalski?
The lowest ranking commander ever. Actually, maybe he is that high speed. Yeah, the only time you ever have to send somebody up for a specific task is when it's Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck to drill into a meteor. And I don't know why I keep going back to Armageddon, because apparently space movie to me means Armageddon.
Yeah,
you space movie, you Armageddon.
You know what's the best space movie?
Don't say Deep Impact.
No.
Okay.
Space Cowboys.
Oh, that was a good movie too.
That
okay.
Movie.
Okay.
And it's always like, let's not send up the trained astronauts. Let's send up these old fogies who are like the original fighter pilots.
I like it.
I love that movie too. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, but it's a bunch of bullshit. Anyway, so yeah, watching again, I was just like, I hated everything. I hated everything about this movie. The first thing I wrote down in my notes for the second viewing of it was, gives useless science facts at beginning. They're the most useless science facts. There were things like, life cannot exist in space. Well, one, yes it can. There are animals on this planet that can survive in space, like, what is it, the water bear? It's this little microbe.
Oh, sure.
Microbial creature that can actually survive in the vacuum of space.
Okay.
It like can't be crushed for some reason. Like, the structure of its body is such that it can survive in the vacuum of space.
Sure.
So that was dumb.
I mean,
and everything else about it was like, all the facts they gave were just like, and the sky is blue, and grass is green. And it was just like, oh my god.
The facts were really weird to me, because when it started, and the first time I don't think I really picked up on it, but the second time, like, I was watching and I was waiting for it to be like, in space, no one can hear you scream. And I'm like, oh, I'm just watching Alien. And then I would have just watched Alien and been like, one of the things that confused me is when the alien was eating somebody, like, how is the alien going to get back? And then I would have just been reviewing the wrong movie.
Yeah,
so yeah, the facts were a bit weird.
Yeah, and then one of the things I also picked up, there's a series of things I picked up on. Ed Harris, Houston, essentially says, we're going to miss you, Matt. They never established that his character's retiring from the space program.
Well, they kind of,
they allude to it, I guess, in that you're supposed to assume at that point that he's retiring.
See, I don't mind that, because it means they didn't spell it out, right? Because one of my big criticisms in movies is like, we're going to miss you, Matt, because you're retiring, because your character is done in space.
Right, but I actually had the opposite reaction where I'm like, we're going to miss you, Matt. By the way, you're totally dying.
Oh.
Because that's foreshadowing.
Right.
But it was like the most ham-fisted, obvious foreshadowing on the planet. As soon as they said it, I was just like, ugh.
Okay, alright. I accept your point.
Yeah, we missed it the first time because we were talking so much.
Yeah.
But that was baby's first foreshadowing.
Yeah, fair enough.
I picked up on, like I said, Dr. Stone was actually, a medical doctor and was up in space because she developed this thing. That was something I picked up on the second time. That was kind of cool. I wrote, Jesus Stone grab Sharif. Because, like I said,
that's right. Yeah.
I was like, this is Sandra Bullock struggling in space. And so a specialist Sharif was like, being flung away, and she goes to grab him, and she couldn't grab him because she can't do anything in this movie, apparently.
Right. One thing that you pointed out that I didn't realize was that she struggles so much. Mm-hmm. And I think that I subconsciously picked that up, and I think I probably liked it. Because, like, when we were yelling at each other about Star Wars, I need people to struggle because people struggle.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that I noticed the second time also was that it focuses on the picture that Sharif had around his neck of his family.
Oh.
which is also kind of one of those like.
Wait, is this when you see what happened to him?
No, it was. Actually, yeah, I think that was.
Oh, I was too busy looking at the hole in his face.
Well, no, that's the thing. They have the hole in his face, and then it pans away to this picture, and it stays there for about 15 seconds. I kind of counted it out.
Okay.
And I was just like, oh my God, these emotions I'm having for this guy who, he had a family. How bad? Oh no, he's dead in space.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah,
got it.
Oh my God. The soundtrack. Oh, this is something I noticed. The soundtrack to this movie also was basically just like, and now you feel excited.
Yeah.
And now you feel sad.
Yeah.
Everything about it was such broad strokes. There was no nuance to this movie. I think that's why I didn't like it. There was nothing about this movie that wasn't just a slap in the face for like the way you're supposed to feel. Like Sandra Bullock is supposed to be you, and her daughter died, and suddenly she like doesn't have the will to live, and then the music is playing at the time. It's like super sad.
Yeah. So when it comes to movies, when you use things like the soundtrack and you kind of ham-fist stuff, I think those are usually called cheap movies, right? Mm-hmm. Because basically instead of making you feel by presenting a story, it's telling you what to feel by using other cheap effects.
Right, and I guess that's kind of why I didn't care for this movie, is that it just really felt like a cheap movie. It was all the emotional exploitation of a movie made by a worse director. The guy who made Children of Men made this. Like, that seems quite astounding to me. Children of Men is one of my favorite movies, and I felt like everything about it was like really well directed. The soundtrack was great. This movie was just so over the top and so presented to you on like a silver platter, like all the things that you're supposed to feel and think, that it just felt like it wasn't the best. It didn't seem like this was deserving of the same director.
Okay, sure. I think what you described is, I think we talked about, for the idea for this outside of Star Wars, which was, I expected better of you, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And that was kind of how I felt about the new Star Wars.
Right, yeah.
So I understand where you're coming from.
So, yeah, there's just nothing about this movie that I liked. Like, going in the second time, I didn't want to do it. It felt like I had to struggle to start watching this movie. And then watching it, I got a version of the movie that had some special effects at the end. And I remember pausing it right when they got into the Chinese space, or when not they, got into the Chinese space station, pausing it and thinking that I still had another hour left of the movie. And I was just like, I'm done. I was like, I'm so over this movie. I don't want to watch another hour of this fucking movie. Then I turned it on, and it was like 5 minutes later it was done. I was like, oh, okay. It was the extra effects, or the, special presentation at the end of another hour.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because you just look down at, your VLC or whatever, and you look at that and you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
I understand.
I actually purchased this on Amazon, because when we first watched it, we rented it. However, it's not available for rent anymore on Amazon Prime, so I had to purchase it. And as soon as I was done, I immediately looked at their, like, can I return digital movie?
Wow.
Yeah.
You really hated this movie.
Yeah, I wanted my $10 back.
Wow.
It turns out you can't. As soon as you start streaming on Amazon Prime, you can't return a movie.
We need some sponsors, by the way.
Yeah. Hey, Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
You want to sponsor us? Yeah, no, I cannot stand this movie. This movie is god-awful. It's just trash.
Okay, well, okay.
I will say this, though. It is a visual feast. It is a beautiful movie. The CGI rendering, once you get over the fact that it's all computer graphics, it is unbelievable. It is so amazing to look at, and I wish that I had seen it in a theater. If I had to watch this movie, I wish I had seen it in a theater, because that's where it belongs. You need to see it one time for the event. It's an event. It's not really a story. There's not really a story to tell in it.
It's an experience.
Yeah, that's what I mean to say.
It's an experience. Yeah.
It's an experience. And it's just a feast for the eyes, and it's so great. If it is a proof of, mankind's ability to create art, it's the fact that it is so awesome to look at. I can't praise it enough for its visual effects.
Yeah, and I think that I don't think anybody would ever disagree on that. I mean, CGI, there's a lot of CGI in a lot of movies, and the thing is people say I hate CGI movies, and what they really hate, bad CGI.
Right.
Because, there is so much CGI everywhere, but when it's well done, you don't even notice it.
Yeah.
And I know there was a thing about Sandra Bullock, 13 wires and, wire work and things like that, so that was absolutely fantastic. But, for my second screening, I actually ended up really liking it. And, dude, trust me, I am just as shocked as you, because the first time I hated it. And then when I watched it again for the second time, I realized, like, we kind of discussed it the first time where I said some of the technical stuff, I really felt like I was losing the forest for the trees. And the second time I went into it imagining, like, it's not in space, it's on the sea. Because I don't really know anything about the sea. And so it was basically my way of ignoring the minutia and really appreciating the story. And I will give you that I do still think the story is simple. It's basically three of the same thing, getting the locations, which I'm not a fan of. But one thing that I really liked was basically, I liked that she was a real character. I liked that she struggled. I do agree with you that some of the stuff was ham-fisted. But I don't know, I kind of, when I viewed it as a survival story, I don't know, I really enjoyed it. And it's like, just thinking about the isolation and being alone and then having to get through these problems. I don't know, I guess the second screening, it just wasn't I wasn't as upset about it as I was the first time. I'm glad you brought up the music, because I actually really enjoyed the music. And it was mixed a bit too loud, because it was basically like, yeah, feel hopeful now, feel sad now.
Right.
But I really enjoyed it. And it also kind of felt, like there's a company, and I know there's multiple companies in Hollywood, but like one's called like X-Ray Dog.
Yeah.
And like you can, like all of their albums is full of basically classical, not disruptive type music that's designed to elicit a certain emotion. And I felt like I don't know anything about the score here, but I felt like they just did that. And he's like, well, need a hopeful song here.
Yeah.
Like, need a sad song here. But I don't know. It's just, when I watched it the second time, I enjoyed it. Just watching her kind of struggle and grow. And yeah, it was ham-fisted and it wasn't nuanced. I really enjoyed that it was 90 minutes, because I know you and I have talked about the 90-minute movie and how that's a positive. And I loved the abrupt ending, because I one of my biggest things is when things get dragged on, Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson looking at you, and I felt like they're in 8th grade English, and like, well, gotta have the denouement, like, gotta wrap this sucker up. And it's like, there was no wrapping it up. Like, you're just assuming that they send a rescue team, and I don't know, maybe they don't, or maybe they can't find her, and then she dies on the island. But that's not really the point, right? The point is, like, the overcoming of the human spirit. And I guess I just enjoyed it the second time.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
I did not have that reaction.
Yeah.
It was one of those, like, people want to survive when they're in space. It's like, that, it didn't feel like it was a story that needed to be told. And I guess that's why I didn't care for it.
Well, yeah, you know what? What's interesting is, I think you're right. Like, this is probably one of the oldest stories, which is like a caveman, like, breaks his leg and he's got to get back to the tribe. And it's, it was simple. I mean,
But then I guess I also compare it to, it's the human nature to want to, like, survive, right? But The Martian did it so much better. And I know, like, The Martian's newer, like, Gravity was quite...
Well, it's 2013.
Yeah, so it's not older necessarily, but it was the first in, like, I feel like a series of space movies. Like, it was kind of like the first in the revitalization of space movies.
Well, I think NASA's Curiosity rover.
Yeah.
That was a big thing, right? Because I remember, like, listening, and the Mohawk guy that everybody loved, who I think was like the mission commander, and it's like, NASA guys didn't look like that, and it kind of, reinvigorated
our interest in space.
And then here comes Hollywood doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
So you are right, and maybe it suffered, right? Because
it was first.
Yeah, anytime something's first, it's going to be a lot harder.
Right. And so, I guess that's, maybe I'm not being fair to the movie by comparing it to the movies that came afterward in the same vein. Like Interstellar, which I love, and The Martian, the movie of which I've not seen, but I have read the book.
Okay, yeah.
So that's kind of why I was like, oh, here's another survival plot in space.
Right.
But it doesn't, but at the same time, he's not actually in space, he's on Mars, and maybe that's, it's a bit different. Maybe I'm not being fair to Gravity for that reason. I'm willing to accept that.
Right.
Going back really quickly, though, there is one thing that I wanted to point out that I noticed, and I don't know if you noticed it. I want to talk about it. When Sandra Bullock is having that hallucination in the Soyuz escape pod, and Kowalski comes back.
Vodka.
Oh yeah, the vodka. He was an angel. That's who he's supposed to be representing of. Because he was so stark in contrast to the coloring of her. She was so dingy, and he was so blaringly white. Not his face. He's
right.
George Clooney. He's a white guy.
He's a good-looking guy.
His suit though was like pristine. He was, in my opinion, he was supposed to be like, his character had died, and he was sent by a higher power to direct her to finish the mission, which is the mission to get home. And like, like give her the little push that she needed. Like,
yeah.
And so he came back as an angel.
So I did not pick up on that. I didn't make that connection, which is interesting because I know that when we talk about movies, normally I'm always the one that does things like that. The white suit, it also could have been a visual clue, right? Mm-hmm. Which is basically like, this is a hallucination. And you know that I love it when movies do that, because all mystery stories, the best mystery stories are when all the clues are there and you don't notice. Because anybody can write a mystery that's basically unsolvable, and it's like, oh, like what a twist. But the best ones are ones where that visual cue is there.
Yeah.
But you are right that, I mean, I could easily see that being analogous to an angel. And I remember, one of the things is, I don't know why I remember this, but she's kind of talking and George Clooney says, do you want to go home or do you want to stay here?
Right.
And it's kind of that thing where it's still giving her a choice, right?
Yeah. He was essentially St. Peter, right? He was basically like, do you want to live or do you want to, come into the kingdom of God in a way?
Yeah, I guess so. I thought St. Peter was just like judging. I didn't think there was...
Maybe I'm making a leap there.
No, but you are absolutely right, and I did not really pick up on it. That I think that George Clooney was kind of a guardian angel there.
Right.
Yeah, no, good call. Good call.
So it's quite interesting to me that you came to like the movie.
You know me. The black void of gravity that we're yelling to does not know me, but they will. I'm very binary, and like the bit can flip. I thought that I was just going to hate it. I thought the first one was going to be like the kill, and the second one was going to be like the autopsy. Yeah. Where I was like, I developed an even more comprehensive list of like reasons why I hated this movie. And I was shocked when I was watching it, and I was like, there was obviously some stuff that bugged me. Like when she's getting towed and she's just like, I drive. I'm like, stop. Yeah. Like, come on. But I just really enjoyed it the second time, and I don't know why.
Because that was the exact experience for me, where the first viewing was the killing, the second viewing is the autopsy. The first viewing I have like maybe 5 notes. The second viewing I have an entire page of notes, and most of them are nitpicky notes about why I cannot stand this movie. One of my notes is quite literally, Dr. Stone is the boringest character ever.
Well, they use boring characters because it's a cheap maneuver because you can project onto them, right?
Right, yeah.
And
I know, she is the audience. Like, she is the avatar upon which the audience can like, I'm Dr. Stone, right?
Well, they even have the POV scene from the best movie ever made, the Doom movie.
Yeah. A couple things that I noticed, actually. Let me kind of go through my notes a little bit before we wrap up. As part of my second viewing, they did this, like, the blue eyes, brown eyes callback, which I kind of hated.
That was dumb.
Well,
that was dumb.
So, for the listener, what that is like, when the movie first started, Lieutenant Kowalski was kind of, like, flirting with Dr. Stone a little bit. George Clooney was flirting with Sandra Bullock, because for this entire recording, I've referred to them by their actual name, because, like, I don't care about their character. So it's George Clooney and Sandra Bullock in space. He was flirting with her and saying, like, oh, you have beautiful blue eyes, or something about, like,
he said, you have
beautiful blue eyes, like, I have brown eyes.
Yes.
And then when Kowalski is floating away to die, he's like, I realize now, like, you're super attracted to me, or something. Like, he, like, is basically flirting with her again.
He's very cocky fighter pilot,
And he's like, tell me, everyone says I have beautiful blue eyes. Tell me I have beautiful blue eyes. And she goes, you have beautiful blue eyes. And he's like, I have brown eyes.
Oh
my God.
That was a totally sick pickup line.
It was great.
But it did annoy me in the movie.
Yeah, I hated it in the movie, but that's an amazing pickup.
Yeah.
I love that. One of the questions I have is, like, do astronauts wear only underwear under their suits? Because when she took her suit off in the ISS, she was immediately in, like, boxer shorts or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, well, she probably would have had a diaper on, to be honest. But, nobody wants to see that.
Yeah. I was just kind of like, she took her suit off and then she was, like, in underwear. I'm like, is that right? Like,
yeah.
Wouldn't she be wearing, like, thermal underwear instead of, like, booty shorts?
I would imagine, but I'm not an astronaut. But I'm willing to try.
So, the ISS scene for Sandra Bullock's character was definitely a rebirth point. One, we talked about the fetus imagery, in the womb, she's in the womb, that sort of thing. But she also kind of does something interesting. She, at that point, as soon as she enters the ISS, she stops referring to George Clooney's character as Kowalski and starts calling him by his given name, which is Matt.
Interesting.
She was like, Matt, are you there?
Oh,
Matt?
That's right. Yeah, good call.
Instead of Kowalski, which I thought was quite interesting, which is kind of part of her rebirth. And then it was after that point that she started using Kowalski's radio discipline.
Yes.
Where she starts doing the, Houston in the blind, blah, blah, blah.
And there's an element of, when Kowalski, is it Kowalski? Kowalski. When Kowalski leaves, the character leaves, part of her rebirth is she picks up his character. Mm-hmm. And he's kind of absorbed into her.
Right, yeah, yes. I agree. And then one final note. When she was trying to detach the parachute from the Soyuz rocket, she stabs the screen. Now, that's a phrase which means that she stares directly at the fourth wall, at the audience.
Okay.
And that was another one of those things that I kind of hated, because it's basically like, how dramatic. You should feel excited right now. I'm staring right at you, right? It was
right.
And that's why you don't stab the screen.
Okay.
But this is even weirder to me, because it wasn't even that Sandra Bullock screwed up and stabs the screen as a actor. She's a CGI character. They digitally made her stab the screen.
Okay.
It was so jarring to me. I'm just like, why did you do this? Why? It was so like, it was the cheapest move in what I felt like was the cheapest story, but such a beautiful visual movie.
It is, yeah. I accept your points, and it's interesting because, yeah, that's kind of how I felt the first time, and I don't know what changed.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's our review of Gravity. I can't stand it. I never want to even think about it ever again. Matthew seems to enjoy it. It's a Friday night movie. For
there's better space movies to watch,
Yeah.
but like Armageddon. But
I guess I'm glad that you enjoyed it the second time. I'm glad I didn't subject you to the pain that I went through.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I was watching it on like 2 hours of sleep, so
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe
true.
that's the key.
That could be part of it. All right, so yeah, that was Gravity, and for our next episode, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to see a new movie.
Which means I have to pay money.
You have to pay money, and so do I.
Yeah.
We're going to watch Zootopia.
Which is going to be great because I hate these movies. Like,
Really?
Yes, we're going to get into it way more, but it's
great.
like the only big-eyed orphan animal adventure movie that I enjoy is The Incredibles. And there's no big-eyed orphan animals in there. The CG movies, I can't stand them.
Okay.
And so it'll be interesting.
All right. I'm looking forward to it. I am a fan of animation of all kind, and so I'm looking forward to seeing it. I think it's going to be really fun. This is my initial, I don't know anything about it other than like a 30-second teaser that I saw once.
Right.
We're going to watch Zootopia, and we're going to give you a review next episode.
In the next episode, the guy who hates Gravity because it's too baity and cheap will describe how much he likes the ultimate pinnacle of baity and cheap, a big-eyed orphan animal adventure.
I kind of hate you for making that analogy, but yeah, I guess he's right.
We're going to keep that on the B-roll and then bring it up next time.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, that'll be an interesting discussion. So join us next time for Zootopia.
Zootopia.